Yesterday, Iran's parliament did approve a plan to close the Strait of Hormuz, which would block $1 billion of oil shipments per day.
The global economy heavily relies on a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman, called the Strait of Hormuz. Though small on the map, it's critically important. Around 20 million barrels of oil, nearly 20% of the world's supply, pass through it daily. This isn't just a trade route. It's a powerful geopolitical tool. Iran understands that placing a few naval mines or launching missile attacks could block the strait and trigger a global energy crisis. Since the shipping lanes are only about 2 miles wide in each direction, they're extremely easy to disrupt. Iran's parliament recently backed a proposal to shut the strait, though the final call lies with its Supreme National Security Council. This isn't empty talk. It's a serious threat using one of Iran's most powerful economic weapons.
A short time ago, the U.S. military carried out massive precision strikes on the 3 key nuclear facilities.
The situation has become even more tense after Israel launched strikes on Iranian targets, killing top military leaders and scientists, and destroying major oil and gas sites, including the massive South Pars gas field. If Iran blocks the Strait of Hormuz, the global economy would be hit hard and fast. J.P. Morgan warns oil prices could spike to $130 per barrel, and even higher if the closure drags on. If prices stay above $100, a global recession could begin. At $200, we might face a depression. This wouldn't be a typical crisis. It would disrupt the core systems modern life depends on. Since 20% of the world's oil and gas flows through Hormuz, any blockage would affect everything from factories to food supplies. Asia would suffer the most. Countries like China, Japan, and others in Southeast Asia rely heavily on oil from this route. Their economies could face factory shutdowns, power outages, and unrest due to rising costs. China is especially at risk, with its industries deeply tied to Persian Gulf oil. This overdependence could lead to a chain reaction, crippling production, stressing power grids, and sparking protests. Europe wouldn't be safe either. European countries import a large amount of oil and natural gas from the Gulf. For example, Qatar provides over 20% of Europe's liquefied natural gas, all of which has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. If the strait is closed, countries like Germany, France, and Italy would suddenly face energy shortages and rapidly increasing prices. Even the United States, which now produces a lot of its own oil and buys only a small portion from the Persian Gulf, wouldn't be completely safe. Oil is a global market, so any major disruption will cause prices to spike worldwide, including in the U.S. The crisis wouldn't just be limited to oil. Transportation would become more expensive, making it harder for people to get to work and for goods to be delivered. Electricity bills would increase dramatically, making life harder for families and businesses. High fuel prices would also lead to more expensive food, medicine, and other everyday essentials. One of the most serious concerns would be the impact on fertilizer. Iran was the world's third largest exporter of urea in 2024, and a lot of that fertilizer passes through the Strait of Hormuz. If those supplies are disrupted, it could lead to food shortages and even famines in parts of the world. Many countries are already struggling economically, and a crisis like this could push them over the edge. Iran has spent decades preparing for this scenario. It has many tools and strategies to shut down the Strait of Hormuz, and some of them are extremely dangerous. One of the simplest and most effective methods would be to lay hundreds of naval mines in the narrow lanes. Even the threat of mines would be enough to stop oil tankers. No captain would risk taking a huge ship through a minefield. Iran's Revolutionary Guard also operates fast-moving boats armed with heavy weapons and explosives. These boats can quickly move between large ships and cause damage. In addition, Iran has placed powerful anti-ship missiles, drones, and submarines along its coast. The United States has said since 1980 that any attempt to close the Persian Gulf would be seen as an attack on U.S. interests. America keeps a large naval force in the region, especially its Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, just for this reason. If the strait is blocked, the U.S. would probably launch airstrikes on Iran's naval bases, missile launchers, and other key targets. This could easily turn into a wider war. NATO might get involved too, especially if European ships or citizens are in danger. China is in a difficult position. It isn't close allies with Iran, but it still buys Iranian oil, ignoring Western sanctions. At the same time, China has strong ties with Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. China's own oil supplies aren't enough to support its massive economy, and its emergency reserves would only last a short time. If the situation gets worse, China might first try to use diplomacy. But if Iran acts aggressively, China might pressure Iran to stop. In the worst-case scenario, China could send its own warships to protect Chinese oil tankers. This would bring Chinese and American forces into dangerously close contact. One of the scariest outcomes would be if this crisis gave rise to other conflicts. If the U.S. becomes deeply involved in a new war in the Middle East, it would have to move many of its military resources away from Asia. That could give China the chance it has been waiting for, to try and take Taiwan. If America's attention and military are focused elsewhere, China might feel it's the perfect time to act, either by launching a blockade or even a full invasion. History has shown how dangerous this can get. During the Iran-Iraq War in the 1980s, both countries turned the Persian Gulf into a battlefield. Oil tankers were attacked with missiles, and mines turned the sea into a graveyard. Hundreds of ships were damaged, and many sailors lost their lives. The international community only stepped in after years of destruction. Iran learned from that time. While it does have major power through the Strait of Hormuz, using it could bring retaliation that might destroy Iran itself. At the moment, Iran has not closed the Strait of Hormuz. Everything discussed so far is a worst-case scenario, but it's a possibility that cannot be ignored. Blocking the strait would also hurt Iran badly. It uses the same route to export its oil and import crucial goods like food and medicine. It would also risk losing China's support if the global economy crashes. Still, when high-level Iranian officials talk openly about using this threat, and if they feel their survival is in danger, we can't rule out the chance that they might actually do it. Iran's leaders might feel that, if they're going down, they'll take others with them, even if it means global chaos. Modern life depends on affordable and steady energy supplies. If you remove that, everything else breaks down. Iran knows that closing the Strait of Hormuz is one of the most powerful moves a country can make because of how deeply the world depends on the oil that passes through it. The idea of a global war shouldn't be taken lightly, but if several nuclear-armed countries are drawn into conflict over this narrow piece of water, one small mistake could set off a chain reaction. The world's economy, security, and way of life could be shaken to the core. Now that missiles have been fired and violence has increased, we may not be able to go back to the way things were. All we can do is hope that wise decisions are made before the situation spirals out of control. That's all for the video. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more updates. Thanks for watching.